In this lecture, we're going to write our very first end-to-end test. We're going to write two of them. The API for writing a test will be familiar to you. From the very beginning, I mentioned that you'd be able to switch to any testing tool. This is because most testing tools adopt similar features and syntax. Let's explore a test by writing one. The very first test we'll write will be a sanity test. A sanity test is a test that should always pass. The purpose of a sanity test is to check if the tools are correctly configured. If the test fails, we'll know that there's something wrong with our tools and not our tests. In your editor, open the cypress/e2e/example.cy.js file. This file is an example test file the CLI plugin has generated for us. Immediately, you will notice some similarities to Vitest. In the file, the describe function is being called to group a test suite. There are two arguments, the identifier and an arrow function. Inside it, the it function is called to create a test block. There are two arguments, the description and function. Other than that, everything else will be new to you. At the top of the file, there's a comment with a link to the Cypress API functions. Feel free to check it out after you're finished with this lecture. The first thing we'll do is empty the test block. We want to start fresh. The identifier for the describe block will be sanity test. We'll leave the description alone for the test block. The test we'll write will be similar to what the original test was. There are two things we'll do in the test. First, we'll visit the home page of the application. Secondly, we'll verify if the home page is rendering by checking if it contains some text. Cypress will launch a browser. We can interact with the browser by using a set of global functions defined by Cypress. The functions can be accessed with the Cy object. The first step was to visit the home page. We'll call the visit function. This function will tell the tool to visit a page. We can pass in the URL to the function. The best part about this is that the CLI plugin has configured Cypress to allow relative URLs to the application. We don't have to pass in a full URL. We'll pass in a / character. This takes care of the first step. The second step is to check if the home page contains a subset of text. We can use the cy.contains function to tell Cypress to search for some text on the page. We'll call it after visiting the page. It has two arguments. The first argument is a selector. We can tell the contains function to search for text in a specific element on the page. We're going to select the logo from the home page. Pass in the following selector, #header a:1st child. The second argument is the inner text of the element. Let's pass in the word music. We're ready to run the test. In the command line, run the following command, npm run test :e2e. This is the command defined by the Vue team for launching Cypress. This process may take a while for some of you. Cypress is attempting to build your project before it launches. After building your project, it'll start the server. Then, it'll open what's called the Cypress Test Runner. This program is where you can view the tests registered for your application. To run a single test, you need to click on it in the list. Let's click on the example.js file. After clicking on it, Cypress will launch a browser. Your test will begin to run automatically. We'll let it run. This will take a while. Let's review what was generated. At the top, a bar will output information about the test and additional tools for interacting with the test. It'll tell us how many tests pass and how long it took. Immediately, you'll notice the test took quite a while to complete. Keep in mind, the duration of the test is not an indicator of how long the app takes to load. Cypress is performing additional tasks during the test. This is one of the downsides of using E2E testing. They take a while to run even for a simple test like this. To the left, we have a log of what the tester did. A green check mark will appear next to the test name to let us know everything worked. In the log, we have the option of inspecting each phase of the test. If I were to hover my mouse over any of the logs, the page on the right would update. Cypress allows you to time travel between each point in the test. This feature can help you better understand what's going on. As you can see, Cypress is extremely powerful. It gives you all the information you'll need to debug a test. The sanity test has passed. We can confirm that Cypress is properly installed. We can begin to test our application. We're going to write another test to get some more practice with Cypress. The test we'll write will check if the audio player can play music. Here's a rundown of what we'll be doing. First, we'll visit the home page. After visiting the home page, we'll select the first song in the list of songs. Then, we'll start playing the audio. The test will wait 5 seconds to let the audio play. Once 5 seconds have passed, we'll pause the audio. It's a really simple test, but it is something you would write. You will want to check if the audio player is fully functional. In the editor, create a file called audio.cy.js. All test files must have the cy.js extension. Otherwise, the test may not be picked up by the Cypress test runner. We'll add a describe block to group the test suite. The identifier will be audio player. Next, we'll call the it function to create a test. We'll use the following as a description: plays audio. In the function, the first thing we'll need to do is visit the home page. We already know how to do that. We can call the cy.visit function with a / passed in. We don't have to pass the full URL because Cypress is configured to visit our app. This allows us to pass in relative URLs. The next thing we'll do is click on the first song in the list of songs. We can select an element on a page by using the cy.get function. This function has one argument, which is the selector. We should select the songs on the home page. However, they don't have a unique selector for us to use. Let's open the song item component. Inside the first router link component, we're going to add a class called composition name. This class will help us select the links generated by the router link component. Back in the test file, we'll add this selector to the get function. This selector will work, but there is one problem. We have multiple songs in the list. We want to select the first one. If the get function finds multiple elements, it'll return an array of selections. We can select the first item in the list by using the first pseudo-selector. Afterward, we'll chain a function called click. The click function will tell the browser to click on the element we selected. The browser will navigate to the page. After the page was loaded, we'll want to play the audio. The audio can be played by pressing the play button on the page. We'll select it like we selected the song in the list. Call the cy.get function. The selector will be #playbutton. This element doesn't exist in our application. Let's add it to the button for playing a song. Open the song component file. Search for the button element. We'll add an ID attribute with the value play button. Switch back to the test file. We'll chain the click function again. This is how we'll select it on the page. This action will cause the audio to start playing. We'll want to wait a while before we pause the audio. Cypress comes with a function for waiting. We'll call the cy.wait function. Cypress will wait before proceeding with the next action. We need to pass in the time to wait in milliseconds. We'll wait for 5,000 milliseconds. ESLint may be configured to disallow waiting from within a Cypress test. If that's the case, We can disable ESLint for this line of code by pressing the Quick Fix option. The last thing we'll do is click the pause button on the audio player. We'll call the sci.get function one last time. The selector will be #player_play_button. Once again, this selector doesn't exist. We'll need to add it in. Open the player component file. On the first button, we'll add the ID attribute with the value player_play_button. Switch back to the test file. We'll chain the click function to pause the audio. We're finished. Writing tests is this simple. We don't have to worry about checking if the page has loaded. Cypress is smart enough to start clicking after the document is fully loaded. The only time we have to tell it to wait is after the audio starts playing. Before we run our tests, there's one gotcha with the test runner. The test runner will launch the preview server, not the dev server. We must build our project again before running the tests. In the command line, turn Cypress off. Next, build the project. Lastly, let's launch Cypress with the npm run test :E2E command. In the test runner, click on the audio test. Great! We've written our first real test. We were able to test the audio by selecting elements and then mimicking the user behavior of clicking on them. Cypress provides us with the functions necessary for interacting with the browser. With that finished, that wraps up this section on testing. Admittedly, testing can feel repetitive and boring, but after you've written them, you never have to worry about manually testing your app again. Testing allows you to automate a lot of the process for testing a feature. If you ever write new features for your app, you can run the tests to make sure nothing else breaks.